Good evening, I'm Zincle Asamoah, coming to you from NBC News World Headquarters in New York City. Here are some of the stories we're following on Now Tonight. Manslaughter. Prosecutors say they will charge actor Alec Baldwin with involuntary manslaughter in the killing of a cinematographer on the set of his film Rust.
The gun was supposed to be empty. I was told I was handed an empty gun.
A monster storm. It's moving east across the country and putting more than 20 million Americans under some kind of winter weather warning or advisory. While recovery begins in California, President Biden is touring parts of the state just ravaged by harsh storms. And bills, bills, bills. The U.S. is hitting its debt limit today. Now the clock is ticking on how long the federal government can keep paying its bills.
It would be catastrophic and inconceivable for the United States to default.
Don't say goodbye, remembering the life and career of legendary singer-songwriter David Crosby. We begin this evening with severe winter weather battering the country tonight. Some states getting as much as 2 feet of snow. This latest storm system is wreaking havoc on millions. There are winter storm warnings in parts of Michigan and Colorado. In fact, Denver has been hit with its biggest 2-day January snowfall in decades, while folks in parts of Nebraska got up to 2 feet of snow today. And now the storm is heading east. That incoming system is already bringing heavy rains to New England, and that rain is expected to turn into snow, and a lot of it over the next 24 hours. Snow hit Minneapolis, St. Paul today, putting the Twin Cities at over 50 inches for the season already, according to a local meteorologist there. NBC's Jesse Kirsch reports from Minneapolis as the storm passes through. Jesse, thank you for joining us. I know it's cold, so we'll get you inside soon. So what have you been seeing today in Minnesota? What do we need to know?
Yeah, so it's probably hard to tell because it's dark out, but we've still got a light flurry falling here in Minneapolis right now, Zincle. And the snowfall that we've seen here in the Twin Cities today is part of the same storm that hit California days ago and has been sweeping across the country, already hitting multiple states. We've seen whiteout conditions paralyzing roads in Nebraska. We've seen semis leading to pileups in Colorado. So the roads are treacherous. We talked to someone here in the Twin Cities earlier who said he was staying off the roads today and certainly was aware of the fact that the conditions were slick, something I could tell when I was walking in the neighborhood when we got on the ground here. And it's cold here right now. We're actually expecting the temperatures to stay low here in the Twin Cities for several days. So the snow you're seeing here probably may not melt until next month. That's what we're looking at. And again, what we're seeing from California to here and what is now moving east of here even is part of one winter storm that has been moving across the country for days. Tonight we've got 12 million people from the Midwest to New England under winter alerts. So we are not through this system yet. And it's not just snow. It has also brought rain to the Northeast. We're also looking at severe weather threats in the Midwest as well. Indiana and Ohio specifically, people there are dealing with that tonight. And we've also already seen a tornado touchdown in Arkansas. So just a mix of different headaches across the country. Again, all of this tied to one storm, and it is not done with us yet. Zincle?
One storm with big reach, 12 million people, and they're still going to see that snow for a month, you said. Wow. Jesse Kirsch, thank you. Stay warm. Now let's bring in our very own meteorologist, Angie Lassman, with a forecast. Angie, what should we be expecting from this and also where?
Yeah, Jesse said we're not done yet, and he's exactly right. We're going to start to see this system continue its trek to the east. We still have some impacts as far as some strong to even severe storms possible through the rest of the evening. That's going to be focused mainly in parts of Ohio, although that threat is going to diminish here quickly as well. We have some lingering snow showers stretching into parts of the Great Lakes, the upper peninsula of Michigan, as well as northern parts of Wisconsin. And then this rain, this wintry mix, the snow that's impacting folks in the Northeast and stretching into New England here as we get through the day tomorrow. Let's focus first on Ohio. We're starting to see that line of strong storms moving out. We still do have that threat for maybe a strong storm or two through the rest of the evening hours. But the good news is all the watches and warnings that we saw earlier, they've all since expired. So the threat is diminishing, but we're not going to completely ignore it here through the rest of the evening. This is the area that we're still watching for the strong wind gusts, the potential for possibly some hail, not so likely as a tornado, but we're still going to keep a close eye on that in parts of Ohio. We saw some wind damage in eastern Indiana here through the day today. Now, This is the good news that we're going to see from this system. It's on its way out tomorrow. We still have some lingering snow showers that we'll have to deal with. They'll be scattered across parts of the Northeast. The highest elevations in places like Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, that's where we'll see the highest accumulations. But we could still see some difficulty when it comes to travel, especially because we have the potential to see some gusty winds with this system as it continues to move out. We're going to see those snowfall forecasts end up anywhere from 4 to 8 inches. Again, in some of those higher elevations. How about the temperatures? You heard Jesse say it's going to be cold where he is. Not so much here as we get into tomorrow. We'll see temperatures in the high 40s in Philly, Richmond at 59 degrees, running about 14 degrees above normal. But we do end up seasonably cool by the time we get into Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. We could potentially see some rain working up the East Coast in Clay. That's where we'll watch for impacts maybe coming into the weekend as far as some rain and maybe some snow. We still haven't had snow in New York City, so to be determined.
Fingers crossed. I love a first snow, though.
We need it. It's the third or fourth longest that we've gone, so we're due for some.
A lot to watch out for. Angie Lassman, thank you. In California, the relentless rain has finally broken. But after weeks of catastrophic flooding, rain, and mudslides, the state is facing a billion-dollar cleanup that involves federal aid and a presidential visit. Here is the wharf in Capitola. Parts of this boardwalk ended up inside, yes, inside, businesses along the water. And this is just part of what the president saw today. Biden joined the governor and part of the state's congressional delegation. Together, they looked ahead to the massive recovery effort.
It's not as obvious from the air just how much damage has been done. We flew over the entire area, in parts of the state, they got more rainfall in a single day than they get in an entire year in parts of the state. Drenching rains, powerful winds, floods, landslides, but you don't feel it till you walk the streets or when you're able to walk. The key is not just building back, it's building back stronger.
Building back stronger. 9 atmospheric rivers slammed into the state over 3 weeks. Each was a massive rain event on their own. Strong winds brought down trees and knocked out power. Mudslides took homes off the sides of mountains. Floods made rivers look like entire lakes, and at least 22 people died. Joining us now is NBC News correspondent Gadi Schwartz in Capitola, California. Gadi, what does recovery look like right now? I think I can see some of it happening behind you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Zincle, this is what the recovery looks like right now. People are down here on the beach. This is normally a pristine beach here in Capitola, but you can see people are removing those guys, 3 guys moving that log out of here. A lot of people are coming down to collect some of this wood. It is heavy, heavy wood. In fact, Zincle, the one that they're working on over on the other side of these people right here, it's a massive piece of redwood that was taken out to sea and then brought back in, and it has to weigh tons. And so you've got this sort of cleanup, and then you have the boardwalk right over here. You were just talking about how part of that wharf was destroyed and then pieces went into some of the buildings. This is Zelda's. This is one of the areas where pieces of the wharf actually made their way in when the water was so high it breached this little levee right here, and it made its way inside of that business. That wharf that's missing that piece, it's right over there. You can see that gap missing. So here's what we've heard so far from President Biden. He says that all of the debris cleanup, that's going to be done by FEMA, and that's going to be covered by federal dollars. In just a second here, sorry to have a little bit of a noisy background, but he's got a chainsaw going. You're going to start to hear that chainsaw because that's part of the removal process. So earlier, the president saying that all debris was going to be removed and covered by federal aid. So far, we've heard estimates of $55 million here in the Santa Cruz area, about $1 billion worth of damage all across California. And then the president talking with Governor Gavin Newsom about how much of the federal government assistance was going to go to the rest of the damage, not just in cleanup and infrastructure projects like repairing some of those roads, some of the damage caused by the 500 or so mudslides that we saw, but also as that sound that you just played, that the statements made by the president, building back stronger. It's something that we've heard from residents who went through this for about a month. It wasn't just one storm. It was storm after storm after storm, them cleaning up and then it happening again, cleaning up the mud and then happening again. So there is so much talk right now in California about how to storm harden this entire coast, and that conversation is going to continue for some time.
I'm sure it will, especially what you're describing, right? The recurring storms, so much healing and recovery. recovery needed. NBC's Gotti Schwartz, thank you so much. And today, the U.S. reached its debt limit. So what exactly does that mean? Well, it means the country will run out of money if that cap on borrowing is not lifted. That existing borrowing limit is $31.4 trillion. Once we hit that limit, which we did today, the U.S. will have to begin using what Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen calls, quote, extraordinary measures. So what are those? Well, basically, they are accounting maneuvers that will allow the Treasury to keep paying its obligations. Secretary Yellen estimates we have until early June before those options will go out the window. Now it's up to Congress. House Republicans say they won't raise the borrowing limit unless the president agrees to some spending cuts. The president argues it should not be done without strings attached. So let's talk to Elon Moy, a reporter from CNBC Business News, to break this all down. Thank you for being here, Elon. So first, can you explain what it even means to default on our debt and what will happen if we do?
Yeah, so it might sound complicated to default on your debt, but basically what it means is that America would not pay its bills. And when we even just flirted with this happening back in 2011, it caused a dramatic drop in the stock market and a downgrade in U.S. credit. So this was bad for the global economy, it was bad for Wall Street, but it could also be really bad for the average household. There was a recent analysis by a center-left think tank called Third Way that projected if we actually defaulted, it could result in the loss of 3 million jobs, decrease the size of the average retirement portfolio by $20,000, and increase the cost of a mortgage by $130,000. So there are broad-ranging ripple effects that could come if we were actually to default on our debt.
And we heard from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, right, saying that, quote, extraordinary measures began today to avoid a default. But what exactly are those? What do they look like?
Yeah, so there are a number of different tools that Treasury could use. It started with two of them, ones that would pause new investments and reinvestments in health and benefit funds and some savings funds for government workers. There's another tool she could use that would pause investments in a currency exchange stabilization fund. So this is actually all just kind of a hodgepodge of things that Treasury can do, and that's really important because it means that the date and the actual deadline of when the country could default is a moving target. It's incredibly uncertain because it all depends on how much money is coming in and out of the nation's bank account. And so that adds another layer of risk and uncertainty into the very complex negotiations that Congress will have to face over the next few months.
Complex negotiations, and we've already been hearing from the Hill. We heard from Senator McConnell earlier today. Let's take a listen and we'll talk on the other side.
It's always a rather contentious effort. In the end, I think the important thing to remember is that America must never default on its debt. It never has and never will. But we'll end up in some kind of negotiation with the administration over what the circumstances or conditions under which the debts are going to be raised.
So we heard McConnell say there, America must never default, and the U.S. has never defaulted on its debt, but it has raised the debt limit 78 times since 1960, 29 times under a Democratic president, 49 times under a Republican. So why exactly does this keep happening, Elon?
Yeah, so I think that in 2010, with the rise of the Tea Party, that was really when you heard hardline conservatives start to use the debt limit as a moment and a tool to force a conversation across the country about the level and type of government spending that Washington has undertaken. And there are definitely lawmakers on both sides of the aisle who say that is an important and worthwhile conversation to have. It just shouldn't be tied to this must-pass legislation that could potentially plunge the nation into economic collapse. So that's really the issue here. And there have been some discussions over the years about ways to address the debt limit differently. Democrats want to get rid of the debt ceiling altogether. There are bipartisan bills that would change the process so that the president would have more authority to raise the debt ceiling. But of course, in order to pass any of those bills, you need compromise in Congress. And right now, we are really far away from any sign of compromise.
Well, something to be watching. CNBC's Elon Moy, thank you so much. And after the break, some of the legal headlines we're watching on Now Tonight, including actor Alec Baldwin charged with involuntary manslaughter, what prosecutors are now saying about the fatal shooting on the Rust movie set. Plus, Kim K is in Ohio today, looking into a triple murder case. Why many people believe one man is wrongfully behind bars. Stick around. Now Tonight is just getting started. Welcome back. I'm Zinklea Samwa. We begin tonight's justice headlines with the Supreme Court. Turns out we may never know who leaked that bombshell draft of the opinion that would overturn Roe v. Wade, more than a month before that decision was actually issued. The Supreme Court announced today that it has been unable to identify the person who leaked the draft to Politico last May. In a statement, the court stated that the team of investigators has been unable to identify a person responsible by a preponderance of the evidence. In Indiana, a father made his first court appearance today on child neglect charges after his toddler was seen playing with a gun. Shane Osborne is facing felony charges, including dangerous control of a firearm and neglect of a dependent. Neighbors called police when they spotted the 4-year-old in diapers handling the weapon. According to police, the gun did not have a round in the chamber, but did have 15 rounds in the magazine. The prosecutor's office requested a greater than standard bond for the father. His jury trial is set for March 20th. In Ohio, reality star Kim Kardashian is advocating for the release of a man serving life in prison. Kardashian featured the story of Charles Keith on her podcast, The System. Keith was charged with the murder of 3 family members in 1994, but he has maintained his innocence. Kardashian and other advocates say inadequate representation at the trial and a faulty police investigation led to Keith's conviction. Now, we turn to the latest from the Rust movie set. Actor Alec Baldwin will be charged by New Mexico prosecutors for the fatal shooting of cinematographer Helena Hutchins. Baldwin and the movie's armor, who loaded the gun Baldwin discharged, will both face 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Prosecutors say Baldwin had the duty to ensure the gun was properly checked and should have never pointed it at anyone. An attorney for the family of Helena Hutchins released a statement saying in part, quote, "It is a comfort to the family that in New Mexico, no one is above the law." Here to discuss this is Rachel Fizet, a criminal defense attorney. Rachel, thank you for being with us. This is a big one. So walk us through these charges. How serious could this be for Baldwin and the armor? And what exactly does the assistant director's plea agreement look like in this case? And what does it mean?
These are very serious charges, and they are serious charges, the most severe charges you can get for an involuntary crime. The prosecutor has accepted that nobody intentionally killed Ms. Hutchins. So they do not have to prove intent on these crimes that they have charged. But from there, they are saying that there was so much negligence, that it was grossly negligent, and that the Alec Baldwin acted without regard for human life, conscious disregard for her life in the way this incident happened. So I believe you're exactly right. What they are saying is he didn't check the gun and he should not have pointed it at her. And they are doing the same thing as it relates to the armorer, whose job it was to check the gun and to control the weapons on set. So they are both facing the same charges. They are probably the same charges that Dave Halls would have been facing as the assistant director had he not pled guilty to lesser charges.
And I mean, Rachel, it's important to note here that we've now heard from actor and producer Baldwin's team. In a statement, they said, quote, "This decision distorts Helena Hutchins' tragic death and represents a terrible miscarriage of justice." Mr. Baldwin had no reason to believe there was a live bullet in the gun or anywhere on the movie set. He relied on the professionals with whom he worked, who assured him the gun did not have live rounds. "We will fight these charges and we will win." What exactly do you make of that statement and Mr. Baldwin's legal strategy moving forward? They're saying we will win. Do you think that is true?
That will be their defense, and their defense is not bad. Alec Baldwin was told that he was being handed a cold gun. He was relying on the representation from his assistant director that there were no live rounds in that gun. And that will be his first and foremost defense. And he was also doing what he was told on the set, which was to point the gun at the camera where Miss Hutchins was standing. So he is going to say inside of this set, he was relying on the people whose job it was to make sure that the gun was safe when it was handed to him, and he was doing what he was told to do.
And I think tonight a question on many people's minds is, are we going to see this very famous actor end up in prison, right? And our very own Miguel Almaguer actually sat down with Andrea Reeve, the special prosecutor on this case, and he asked her that very question, if she believes Baldwin should go to prison. First, let's take a listen.
You know, it's not my call right now to believe whether he goes to prison or not. Our focus is to get justice for Helena Hutchins and to let everybody know that just because you're an A-list actor, you're not going to be above the law.
So, Rachel, what happens here? What's next in this case?
Well, now the case will go like a normal case goes. So I think they have already engaged in a lot of plea agreements to see if they could settle this or dismiss this. That is my hunch based on the fact that there is already a plea agreement on the table for Mr. Halls. And now Alec Baldwin and Hannah Gutierrez will get all of the discovery. They will get their text messages back. They will get everything that they're entitled to, that the prosecution is relying on in prosecuting this case. There will be the normal hearings, arraignment, preliminary hearing. And I think if the prosecutor does not dismiss this case, that you will see a trial as it relates to these charges, because I do not think that Alec Baldwin is just going to accept a crime on this action. And where there's no middle ground, you generally see a trial.
Well, just a heartbreaking case all around. Rachel Fizet, thank you for breaking it down. And after the break, more of the top stories we're following on Now Tonight, including the ongoing search for missing actor Julian Sands. Weather conditions are not making it easy for search and rescue crews in California. Plus, we have new details on what police found at the home of the Idaho murder suspect. And turning off the lights, if it was only that easy. We'll tell you why a Massachusetts school has been wasting thousands in energy costs for over a year. It's time now for some of the big headlines we're watching tonight. Florida Representative Greg Steube is suffering from some pretty serious injuries after a 25-foot fall off a ladder. The House Republican was cutting tree limbs on his Sarasota property yesterday afternoon when he fell. He spent the night in the ICU, and his office says he remains hospitalized but is making progress and is in good spirits. Excessive speed is one of the reasons for a crash that killed football player Devin Willock. Police say the Georgia Bulldogs player was also not wearing a seatbelt when he was ejected from a vehicle over the weekend. The driver of the vehicle, a recruiting staff member, Chandler LaCroix, died at the hospital. Indiana's Supreme Court heard arguments today on the state's abortion ban. Indiana became the first to enact stricter abortion restrictions after Roe v. Wade was overturned. But that plan has been blocked since September when a county judge found it violated privacy protections. The justices are now weighing whether they should decide its constitutionality before lower courts have considered the case. Amazon is discontinuing its charity donation program as the company continues its cost-cutting efforts. Through the Amazon Smile program, the company would donate a percentage of eligible purchases on the site to a shopper's chosen charity organization. The program is planned to end by February 20th. And all of the lights, get this, the lights at a Massachusetts high school have been on for over a year. And it's because no one can turn them off. The lighting system was installed to save money and energy, but the software that runs it failed in August of 2021. A school official says it's costing thousands of dollars a month. Now, the parts to replace the system have finally arrived, but installation is not expected until February. And heading overseas, $2.5 billion in military aid will soon reach Ukraine, but it does not include everything on President Zelensky's wish list. According to the Pentagon, the new package will include 90 Stryker combat vehicles, 59 Bradley fighting vehicles, and a number of other weapons. But it does not include tanks, something President Zelensky underscored the need for in his speech at the World Economic Forum just yesterday. Meanwhile, Ukrainian investigators continue to look into the tragic helicopter crash near Kyiv that killed 14 people, including the country's interior minister. The chopper fell near a kindergarten during morning drop-off, taking the lives of a parent and at least one child. Our Raf Sanchez spoke to one father who shielded his daughter at the kindergarten during the crash.
Forensic investigators were still working the scene of that crash site today, and a police spokeswoman telling us they actually discovered more body parts in the rubble. That leads them to think it is possible that the death toll may rise above the 14 that it's currently at. As for the investigation into the cause of the crash itself, the spokeswoman saying it is likely to take several weeks. It is being led by the State Security Agency of Ukraine, and they say at this point they are ruling nothing out. from some kind of pilot error, a technical malfunction on board that aircraft, or the possibility that this was a deliberate act to kill one of the most senior members of President Zelensky's government. Now, when we were at the crash site today, we met some of the families who had been at that kindergarten the day before when the helicopter slammed into it. I want to tell you about one father. His name is Serhiy. He was dropping his daughter Alina off at school when that chopper came crashing into the building. Serhiy shielded his daughter with his own body, and I wanted to hear from him what it was like knowing that his daughter is growing up in a country at war. Take a listen to a little bit of that conversation. Do you worry what her childhood is going to be like going through all of this?
Yes, of course I'm worried, and the child is worried too. 1 year ago, when the war started, my family went to Poland for 6 months. Afterwards, they came back here. My wife went to work again. My child went to kindergarten. But yesterday, when I brought her home, her first question was, "Dad, maybe it could have been better for us to stay in Poland."
Now, that is just one parent and one child, but this is a story that is playing out all across Ukraine in the millions. We also learned today from the principal of that kindergarten that the child who died was a student there. She was a little girl. Her mother was also killed in that helicopter crash, and it is just the latest tragedy in a country that has had far too many of them over the last 11 months of war.
Sobering report. Our thanks to Raf Sanchez. And here in the U.S., a search warrant is revealing what police found in the apartment of the Idaho murder suspect, including a stained pillow, disposable gloves, and receipts. NBC's Aaron McLaughlin has the story from Moscow.
Hey there. Well, according to newly released court documents, authorities seized a number of items from 28-year-old Brian Kohberger's apartment in Washington State. Kohberger has been arrested on suspicion of the murder of 4 University of Idaho students. And in his apartment, according to these documents, authorities seized a pillow with reddish-brown stain, a stained mattress cover, as well as a dark red spot. The documents specify that some of the items have been sent off for further testing, though not disclosing the results of those tests. Also seized a disposable black glove, as well as strands of hair, including animal hair, which is potentially significant because one of the victims owned a dog that was in the home at the time of the murders. Now, in addition to Kohberger's apartment, authorities also searched his office at nearby Washington State University, although the documents do not disclose if any items were seized from his office. All of this as Kohberger's team is building its defense, previously pushing for court date to be set later in June. Kohberger telling a previous attorney that he believes he will be exonerated, but clearly authorities are also building their case, adamant that he's responsible for the murder of these college students. Back to you.
And the teacher who was allegedly shot by one of her first-grade students has been released from the hospital. That announcement comes as the child's parents released a statement for the first time since the shooting. It reads in part, quote, "Our heart goes out to our son's teacher, and we pray for her healing in the aftermath of such an unimaginable tragedy as she selflessly served our son and the children in the school." NBC's Kristen Dahlgren has more.
Tonight, for the first time, the parents of the 6-year-old boy accused of shooting his first-grade teacher speaking out. In a statement, the family calls it an unimaginable tragedy, offering prayers for Abigail Zwerner, the teacher injured in the shooting, and all those impacted, adding, "Our son suffers from an acute disability and was under a care plan at the school that included his mother or father attending school with him. The week of the shooting was the first week we were not in class with him. We will regret our absence on this day for the rest of our lives." They go on to say the gun used by their son was secured. "Our family has always been committed to responsible gun ownership and keeping firearms out of the reach of children," their statement says. Newport News police say how the child obtained the gun is still an active part of the investigation. And while the parents explain their son is under hospital care, NBC News has learned teacher Abigail Zwerner is now out of the hospital, continuing her recovery as an outpatient. Zwerner was shot on January 6th when the boy allegedly brought a gun to school. The teacher hailed as a hero for getting all of her students out even after she was injured.
I believe that Miss Zorner, Abigail, that she saved lives on Friday.
Investigators say they are now finishing interviews with students who were in the classroom during the shooting that has left a community shaken. Kristen Dahlgren, NBC News.
Our thanks to Kristen for that report. And federal investigators are looking into a possible case of human trafficking. The Department of Homeland Security says roughly 50 children, some as young as 13, were allegedly illegally employed to clean slaughterhouses across the Midwest. The children were hired by a company called Packer Sanitation Services. But it appears that the DHS is not investigating that organization at this time. Rather, officials say they're looking into the possible involvement of outside traffickers. The company is not totally off the hook, though. Federal officials say the sanitation company violated the Fair Labor Standards Act, which prohibits minors from working in hazardous conditions. According to child labor laws, that includes a number of jobs at slaughterhouses. NBC News Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley joins us now to talk about this. Julia, it's good to see you. So what exactly do we know about this investigation so far?
Well, it's an investigation that began in August, and in November, there was a preliminary injunction where a federal judge sided with the Department of Labor and put an injunction on this company known as PSSI. They contract to clean slaughterhouses for meatpacking, and they said that they could no longer hire children to work for them, and in fact, they needed an outside monitor. Now, what we've learned now and what we're sharing here at NBC News today is that Department of Homeland Security is also involved, and they've been interviewing the children to try to determine if they might have been trafficked, if somehow these 50 children who appeared in these Midwestern slaughterhouses may have been part of a larger scheme. Now, PSSI did put out a statement. They said that they have not been contacted by the Department of Homeland Security, and from what we know, no indication so far have pointed to PSSI as any kind of conspirator that would have enabled or trafficked children. Merely the company says that they did check identifications and that there were some fraudulent IDs, so that they did not know that they were hiring children, and that they did not know if they would have been illegal migrants, undocumented migrants at the same time. But obviously, immigration advocates say that especially when you're an undocumented migrant child, you're at a particularly vulnerable place, unable to advocate for yourself, really living under the law. And so these types of things can happen, and they are calling on the federal government to do more to investigate what happened here and to see if it might be part of a larger scheme.
And I mean, you touched on it, right? This is an incredibly vulnerable population, children. Where are they now? And I know federal prosecutors or investigators spoke to the children involved in this case. What did they learn from that?
Well, they're still interviewing them. And in fact, I spoke to an advocate today who's working in the community. Her name is Rachel Lutz. She's worked with migrants in Grand Island for some time now. It's a small town, but they have a large immigrant population, primarily because of places like this meatpacking facility, the slaughterhouse, and Grand Island. And she says that a lot of the children are very timid, very afraid to talk to law enforcement because they're afraid of deportation. So it's really taken a lot to try to get them to open up. But in large part, a lot of these children were going to school by day and going to the slaughterhouse at night. There were reports even going back to 2016 of teachers that noticed signs of children in their classrooms. There was one girl who came to class with burns on her hands from the chemicals she was using to clean the slaughterhouse. But at the time, the company was not investigated. Rather, her own father was investigated for child abuse, for sending her into that situation. So it's not the first time these allegations about children working in these conditions, especially in this very town, have come to light.
And I mean, those images even are so disturbing. I mean, what about the food companies that own these slaughterhouses? Are they being investigated?
It doesn't seem that that's the case now. PSSI is a contractor. They're the ones who are in charge of cleaning. They clean over 700 slaughterhouses across the country. And as we know, Department of Labor has been scouring through the records of at least 50 of those locations. But there's no indication that there's a link to the larger companies, the poultry companies or other meats that actually own these slaughterhouses and these meatpacking facilities.
Important reporting. Julia Ainsley, thank you so much. Now, let's head to Memphis, where preparations are underway for rock and roll royalty to be laid to rest. Lisa Marie Presley, the only child of the legendary Elvis Presley, passed away last week after cardiac arrest. Today, mourners are flocking to Graceland, her father's former estate, and her childhood home. NBC's Priscilla Thompson has more. Priscilla?
Zin Clay, here at Graceland, tributes are continuing to pour in between flowers, teddy bears, and cards, all in memory of Lisa Marie Presley. This was her home. It was her happy place. It was where she spent holidays as a child with her dad, and she was here just days before she died. And it's very fitting that this would be her final resting place. She's to be buried in the meditation garden with her father and her beloved son by her side. Now, in addition to that, there's going to be a public memorial service held on Sunday here on the front lawn at Graceland, with hundreds of people expected to be in attendance. And I've spoken to some of the fans who have come from very long distances to be here and to be here for this moment in history. And I asked them about what this loss means and what Lisa Marie's legacy is. I want to play some of that conversation. Take a listen.
Lisa Marie was the princess, you know, Elvis's princess. Her legacy would be the way she kept Elvis's name alive through her. Her music was awesome. Her 3 albums were brilliant. And, you know, her legacy will live on in her children. And Elvis and Lisa will live on forever.
And Sunday's service will be live streamed, and after that service, fans will have an opportunity to join the procession, which will go through the meditation garden. They'll be able to leave flowers at Lisa Marie's gravesite. And as for what will become of Graceland, NBC News has confirmed with a rep that Lisa Marie's 3 daughters are set to inherit the property. Zin Clay, back to you.
Our thanks to Priscilla Thompson for that report. And British-born actor Julian Sands is missing. The 65-year-old, known for his role in the 1985 movie A Room with a View, was last seen hiking on Southern California's Mount Baldy 6 days ago. So far, all ground and air searches have come up short on evidence. Recent storms in California forced local authorities to pause the ground search on Saturday because of hazardous trail conditions and avalanche risks. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin joins us now. Dana, I know the San Bernardino Sheriff's Office gave an update today. What did we hear?
So they're saying that they used cell phone tracking to pinpoint his location near a trail in the San Gabriel Mountains, but that search came up short. Now, because of the icy, dangerous conditions, they're suspending their search on the ground. They're only searching from up above using drones and helicopters, and they're advising even the most experienced hikers in Clay to avoid that area.
I mean, it's so harrowing what's happened, and I wonder how are family and friends of the actor Julian Sands reacting right now?
You know, they're very concerned. One of his friends says that he is an experienced hiker, and he is optimistic that he is going to pull through this. Also, a fellow actor also tweeting this. This is from Samuel West. He says, please, please let Julian Sands be okay. A friend and an inspiration. Awful news. So obviously this has been very disturbing for friends and family because it's been nearly a week since Sands was last seen.
And Dana, it's not lost on me that this is not the only search and rescue effort that has happened in this area. I understand some have happened in the last month. How did those pan out, and what might that tell us about what we can expect here?
Well, it's really disturbing because in the last 4 weeks, they have done 14 search and rescue missions, and it's troubling because some of the hikers have been missing for a while. 2 of the hikers, unfortunately, died because they were injured. So obviously a concerning situation, you know, also adding to that difficulty. Tonight, we're expecting more scattered showers. So the best hope is that they can find him. Zin Clay.
Keeping him and all of those hikers in our thoughts and prayers. Dana Griffin, thank you so much. Tonight, fans are mourning legendary singer-songwriter and guitarist David Crosby. A source close to the musician confirming he has died at age 81. Crosby was a founding member of 2 enormously influential 60s bands, the Byrds and Crosby, Stills and Nash, which later became Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, with the addition of Neil Young. The iconic musician was also a 2-time inductee to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Joining me now with more on Crosby's iconic career is Chris Willman, a senior music writer at Variety. Chris, welcome. Thank you for talking with us about this. So Crosby's death came as a surprise to so many, especially those who follow him online, specifically Twitter. He was active on the platform actually just yesterday. So do we know any more right now about the cause of death or even Crosby's health leading up to this?
We don't. There's been no cause of death revealed. We just heard it confirmed, I think, through the Sun and their representatives that it happened. And it seems like it was very unexpected because, as you say, he had one of the most active Twitter feeds of anyone of any generation, let alone somebody who's in his 80s. And, when we first heard about it, we went on there and he was busy tweeting as ever yesterday. So it seems to be, unfortunately, with him and Jeff Beck, these people are just dropping without any prior warning. And that makes it all the more stunning, for sure.
So stunning. And of course, as a result, so many people are pouring in tributes. A former bandmate of Crosby, Graham Nash, shared a statement tonight saying in part that David was fearless in life and in music. He leaves behind a tremendous void as far as sheer personality and talent in this world. He spoke his mind, his heart, and his passion through his beautiful music and leaves an incredible legacy. Can you just speak to that legacy a bit for us and some of David's accomplishments and influence in this space?
Yeah, I mean, his legacy, part of it is just musically. He had one of the sweetest voices you'll ever hear in rock and roll, certainly. And then he also had this cantankerous personality, lovably cantankerous if you were on the right side of it, but you just couldn't believe that somebody who had this much trouble getting along with his bandmates could sing so angelically. But, that harmony that Crosby, Stills, and Nash had with and without Young has never been matched in rock and roll. And he was the linchpin in that. He was at the center. It was either Stills or Nash tonight that said, he was just that real bassist. They couldn't have done it without him. And just this incredibly sweet voice, a great acoustic guitar player. Songwriting-wise, he had some of their greatest songs, Deja Vu. He wasn't quite as out there with the songwriting as some of the other guys in Crosby, Stills, and Nash and the Byrds were. But, when he impacted with that, he really impacted. And but he'll just be remembered largely as a great character, as well as someone who ironically created great harmony while sometimes being disharmonious in his personal life.
That's an interesting juxtaposition that you're pointing out. And I wonder, have we seen an artist like this in the rock and roll space who managed to have such range and influence with two major bands?
We haven't, no. If you go back to the 60s, there was a little bit of supergroup crossover that was happening with the Buffalo Springfield and other groups. But those were two of the most seminal groups that still fascinate people today. The Byrds, which he was fired from by Roger McGuinn and Chris Hillman. And then he got in arguments with Stills, Nash, and Young in recent years, and they never quite rode out into the sunset the way we hoped they would. But they stuck around, did reunion tours for decades, and he continued to be relevant as a Twitter presence. I mean, younger generations loved him on Twitter. That was so funny. And he got in a feud recently with Phoebe Bridgers, of all people, about her smashing her guitar. So, the fact that he's able to have intergenerational feuds is kind of fun to think about, even though, we want to remember him most for this beautiful music he made.
Absolutely, and clearly an impact across generations. And I mean, this news is so fresh. So what are you hearing online from fans? What are they saying?
People are pretty heartbroken, and I think it's because they did feel like they knew him through his Twitter feed recently. He tweeted more prolifically than anyone in their 20s, I think. And so it's just stunning. But of course, what people are remembering are songs like Deja Vu, Almost Cut My Hair, a song that he admitted had a silly lyric, and yet he could break your heart singing about not wanting to get a haircut.
Yes, the power of music, as they say. Well, Chris Willman of Variety, thank you so much for helping us remember him.
You bet.
And some companies say they can't find qualified candidates for jobs, but that might not be entirely true. We'll explain when we come back. And now on to a problem facing companies across the country. Many saying they can't find enough qualified candidates. It turns out that automated recruiting systems may be to blame. NBC's Jake Ward has the story.
It's called the paper ceiling, holding down millions of Americans who have the skills for tech jobs, but not the diploma. And that's because automated screening systems often filter out candidates who lack a college degree.
I worked at the airport. I worked as a concierge, a security guard.
It's not skills that held Justice Sanders back, and it certainly wasn't a lack of grit.
When I was doing these jobs, I was always doing something else. Like I was reading my book. I was on Coursera doing online courses.
He just couldn't afford college. And as he tried to find a way into the tech industry, he faced terrible choices.
In order to pay my bills, take care of my mother, and also have the bandwidth to study.
And you had to basically sacrifice rent in order to make that possible.
Exactly. I did have to stay in my car for a little bit.
The world needs workers. Even with recent headlines about big tech companies laying people off,
there likely will be more layoffs across multiple industries.
The World Economic Forum estimates only 1 in 3 tech jobs are filled by someone with the right skills. And yet, because of degree requirements, millions of Americans can't even get an interview.
60% of Black Americans, more than 60% of veterans, almost 70% of rural Americans are excluded.
Byron O'Geist runs Opportunity at Work, a nonprofit that convinces tech companies to look for skills, not degrees.
You've got millions of people who can do the job that you need done, and you are actually spending money to screen them out when you could spend half the money to let them in.
All of us, I think, just need a fair chance to say, if you are able to do the job, then you should be considered for it.
Carolyn Pierce got to college on a skating scholarship, and then a health emergency ruined her plans.
I lost my scholarship, and I was so embarrassed.
She fought her way into tech as a freelance coder and became the first partner at McKinsey not to graduate from college. And yet, she's still emotional talking about it.
Why does it make you feel that way, do you think?
To be honest, I think I've spent most of my career trying to avoid talking about the fact that I didn't finish college. There is like a little almost amount of guilt, or I'm just so grateful that I got the chance. And I know there are so many people who don't get chances like that.
Now, she leads a technology team fighting to change hiring practices.
At one point, took my team's resumes and ran them through one of these systems and, came back saying, we wouldn't have interviewed anybody if we had used that technology.
Nobody on your team would have even been considered for a job?
No.
Wow.
I'm looking forward to it, though.
Justice finally scored an internship with LinkedIn.
When I used some of that street resilience that I grew up with, combined, and now we're here.
And 2 weeks before we sat down, he got a full-time job there.
Let's just say the first time that I received my compensation, I was able to put a smile on my granny and mom's face.
Important reporting, Jake Ward. Thank you. And before we go, the news is not always bleak, but you might not know it from the headlines. So here are tonight's 60 seconds of joy. A 12-year-old boy had the catch of a lifetime in South Florida this week while on a fishing trip with his family. Campbell Keenan reeled in a great white shark. Keenan says it took 45 minutes to get it close enough to realize what he just caught. The crew tagged the shark and named it Jan Jan before sending it back out to sea. The Songwriters Hall of Fame just unveiled their 2023 class, and it's as star-studded as ever. Snoop Dogg, Gloria Estefan, Sade are all inductees, as well as Taylor Swift collaborator Liz Rose. This talented group is behind hits like Smooth Operator, Drop It Like It's Hot, and You Belong With Me. And 6 endangered sea turtles are now swimming off the coast of Florida after being rehabbed by a team in Miami. Left cold, stunned from a rapid temperature drop last month, the turtles were flown down from Massachusetts to the Miami Zoo. The zoo says the turtles made an excellent recovery and were released near Cape Canaveral on Friday. Well, that does it for us. Thank you for ending your day right with Now Tonight. I'm Zinklea Samoa. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.